even though I'm not a plumber. Isabella, our neighbor, asked me to help her fix a broken hose in her bathroom. But while I was helping her, she put her hands in my pants and took my pipe out of my mouth before I knew it. It was lovely, but I have a wife. It wasn't supposed to be this way, she's just a friend, but she's hot, very hot. There was a knock on my door that set it off when I opened it. She was standing there with her perfectly styled hair and sure smile. She looked just as beautiful as was my neighbor. She looked at me and said, "I know this is random. Could you help me with something?" Though the bathroom water hose broke and I have no idea what to do about it, I was unsure. We both knew I wasn't a plumber. When she looked at me, her eyes were wide and there was a hint of fun in them. It was hard to say no. I heard myself say, "Sure." Even though my brain was telling me this was a bad idea, I tried to tell myself that following her to her house was just a nice thing to do for a neighbor. She pointed to the hose and led me to the bathroom. Her perfume was still in the air. It wasn't a big deal. There was just a loose joint that needed to be fixed. I grumbled as I got down on my knees to look at it. I could feel her eyes on me as I worked. She stood too close and watched everything I did. My chest hurt from the pain. The air was getting thick with stress. I could feel her warmth next to mine, and I couldn't get rid of her presence after making the hose tighter. I turned to tell her it was done, but she was already there. The bathroom felt much smaller when our faces were only a few an inch apart. She didn't move or pull away. She instead leaned in and kissed me on the lips. It was a quick, timid kiss that made me gasp for air. That's where I should have stopped, but I didn't when I kissed her back. The energy of the moment hit us like a wave. It just got deeper, and everything changed at that moment. I was the plumber, but she reached into my pants and took my pipe. I didn't even notice until it was gone. We could no longer dance around the line that was gone. We pulled away, both of us, gasping for air because of what had just happened. We both knew that we couldn't take it back now, though. You see, the last time we really talked was about a month ago. My partner had just left for a work trip, so I would be home by myself for a few days. It wasn't a big deal to me. I just wanted a quiet week by myself. Then I met her one night when I was taking out the trash. She was giving her plants water while standing in her yard, at least not up close. I hadn't seen her before, but there was something about her that night that interested me. It looked like she was naturally beautiful. She moved with confidence, her long hair was pulled back, and her body was at ease, but still balanced. She smiled when she saw me and looked up. "Hey, are you new here?" As she walked over with the hose still in her hand, she called out, "I don't believe we've met." Yet, I didn't know what to say because she was so straight. "I did move in a few months ago. Okay, I awkwardly pointed to the bag in my hand and said, "I'm taking the trash out." I felt stupid for saying something so obvious right away. She laughed, and a light sound seemed to linger in the air. She put out her hand and said, "Well, I'm your neighbor. If you ever need anything, I'm right down the street." When I shook her hand, I could feel how warm she was. "Nice to meet you," I said, still trying to get over the fact that her presence was throwing me for a loop. She didn't say much more after that, just a few small talk about the area, but before she went back to her house, she gave me one last look and smiled for a little too long. Her eyes held mine for a moment longer than they should have, if only it looked like it wasn't mean, but the way she smiled at me stuck with me. I forgot about the trash bag when I went back inside, and I couldn't get rid of the feeling of being intrigued. There was something about her, something that stuck out. Even though it was only for a short time, I couldn't get her out of my mind. After that first meeting, thoughts of her would come to me while I was making coffee, watching TV, or just being alone. Maybe it wasn't making sense since we hadn't talked much, but something about her kept making me think of that smile around the neighborhood. I began to notice her more often. She would walk her dog or take care of her yard from time to time. I would sometimes catch her looking at me with that same silly smile on her face just a little. But the way she looked at me made me feel like she knew something I didn't. Every time we saw each other, the time felt like it went by faster than it should have, away from the other side of the yard, a quick chat about the weather, or just a quick hello. There was nothing strange about it, but it was enough to keep your interest alive. These times would make me look forward to them. Wasn't sure how she'd act when I saw her next, at least. That's what I told myself, but the more I looked at her, the harder it was to avoid the nagging attraction between us. In my mind, There was always something bubbling below the surface, ready to bubble to the surface at the right time. Each look and wave started to feel like an offer, even though I tried not to admit it to myself, and offered to do something I wasn't sure I was ready for. When we first talked, it was in the afternoon on a Saturday. I saw her walking by with her dog while I was outside mowing the yard. Like always, she waved, but this time she stopped, attached her dog's leash to the fence, and crossed, she said, "Hey," with that familiar smile on her face. "It looks like you keep your yard really clean. I can't do that." I laughed and turned off the mower. "Thanks, I try." Even though it's sometimes a pain, she crossed her arms and looked around the yard before coming. Back to me. I meant to ask, how are you getting used to your new home? It must be nice to have the place to yourself while your partner isn't there. I didn't answer because the question caught me off guard. Yes, it's been quiet. That's all I need to do to get through the week. She gave me a nod and kept her eyes on mine. You know where to find me if you ever need someone to talk to. Even though she said it in a casual way, I couldn't miss the tone. There was more to those words than just fun. They were a hint at something deeper. We talked about everything and nothing at the same time. She asked me about my job, my hobbies, and how I was getting used to living in the neighborhood. It was too simple. There wasn't any awkwardness or forced small talk. The talk was easy to follow, and before I knew it, we had been talking for almost 30 minutes. We were almost done when she smiled again, that same long smile that had caught me off guard the first time she turned to leave, and said, "Don't be a stranger. I'll let you get back to your yard work. I'm where you are." Her words kept going through my mind as I watched her walk back to her house. Now there was no doubt about it. There was more to that than just a friendly talk. I felt like there was a spark between us that I couldn't ignore. There was a hint of it, but I knew she felt it too. The thoughts stuck with me after she went inside, making me feel something I wasn't sure I could get rid of after a few days. I was sitting on the couch when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone to come when I opened the door, but there she was, my neighbor, with that same silly smile. "Hey," she said with a wine bottle in her hand. "I had way too much wine to drink by myself before going to the movies. I thought you might want to come with me." I paused because I felt that familiar unease. It wasn't just the offer that made me think the way she looked at me with her eyes on mine, just about made me dare to say yes. I knew it wasn't a good idea. I didn't want to put myself in a position where the tension between me and my partner could rise because he was still out of town. But she smiled again. I heard myself say, "Sure, why not?" Before I could think about it too much, I went next door and followed her, trying to tell myself that it was safe and just a friendly invite, not anything else. She poured us 2 glasses of wine when we walked in, and we sat down on the couch. Along came the movie. But it was hard to pay attention to what was on the screen. I could feel that there was a few inches of space between us, but it felt less big and more tight. Something wasn't said, and both of us were walking on eggshells around it. I could feel my heart beating faster every time she moved on the couch and her leg touched mine as the movie went on. We talked about different things, joking around and laughing, but now there was something more to it, the way she admired my sense of humor, and the way her eyes lingered on me for too long, given the hint of flotation. Even though it was quiet, it was there, and every minute that went by, it got harder to ignore how tense things were getting between us, even though I knew I should leave the way. She looked at me as if she were waiting for me to do something, kept me there. I barely paid attention. As the movie went on, the screen's dim light flickered across the room, creating soft shadows, but all I could see was her and how she was getting closer the way her leg touched mine. Every once in a while, it felt like we were both playing a game. Neither of us was paying attention to what was going on, but we were both fully aware of it. She reached for her wine glass and lightly touched mine as she gave it to me to refill. The touch was short but on purpose, and it gave me a shock that was hard to shake off as I tried to avoid the growing pull between us. I laughed it off, but the tension in the room was thick, not possible to miss. The movie didn't seem important anymore. It was just an escape from the real drama going on between us. Every laugh and joke had a hint of something else, something that wasn't said but could be felt. When I thought about how exciting the moment was, and how guilty I felt my mind was rushing when the end credits finally came on. She looked at me and locked eyes with mine. "How did you like the movie?" Her voice was soft, but there was something deeper in it when she asked. Even though I said yes, I couldn't remember a single scene. She leaned back on the couch and put her hand on my shoulder. Do you know, she spoke in a voice that was almost a whisper. Having someone to spend a quiet evening with is nice. There were a lot of hints in what she said. I could feel the stress building between us. We could both feel the weight of the moment on us. This wasn't just about the movie, and we both knew it. I smiled because I didn't know what to say, but she didn't need my words. Because of the look in her eyes, the mood had changed totally, and we were on the verge of something we couldn't get back from. I knew it was time to go, but as I stood up to say goodbye, her hand touched mine again. This time it was slower and more intentional. The room seemed to get smaller around us as we both stopped every second, seemed to last longer than it should have because the air was charged line between us was about to go away, and all I could think about was how simple. The next step would be the stress in the room got too high as I stood there with her hand still lightly touching mine. She smiled, and it was a slow, knowing smile that made my head spin. "You don't need to leave yet, right?" She spoke softly and looked right into my eyes. Now there was no doubt about it. It was no longer just friendly talk. She was chatting, and her tone was both flirty and sexy. We both knew what her words really meant, even though they were vague. I was both excited and guilty. At the same time, my partner was still not home, and I was about to do something I knew was wrong. I was going to leave. But I sat back down instead. Her eyes lit up a little, and she moved her body closer to mine, making the lines between us even less clear. "I've always thought you were more interesting than you let on." She made fun of me by lightly touching my arm with her fingers. I tried to keep my cool as I laughed, but my heart was beating fast every minute that went by. Our flirting got more daring. With each touch, it lasted a little longer. Every look was filled with desire. That wasn't said we still talked about the movie, but not as much. Things were getting more personal in the talk, worse. It wasn't just about the night or my sense of humor when she said nice things about me. They were more personal and pointed. "You're not like most guys around here," she said in a low, smooth voice. Like that, I could feel myself getting caught up in the attention, the thrill of being wanted in a way I hadn't expected. I knew where this was going, and I knew I should stop. But the urge to do so was growing stronger by the second. Her leg brushed against mine again, but this time she wasn't being subtle, and neither was I. The line between us was blurring as the flirting turned into something neither of us could deny. We both knew what was going on, and even though I tried to convince myself it was harmless, I knew we had already crossed it. The next few days were a blur of mixed feelings every time I saw her. Whether it was through my window or as I left the house, I felt bad. The flirtation from that night was still fresh in my mind. The way her touch lingered, and the way her eyes held mine. I told myself to stay away and keep things normal, but I wasn't fooling anyone, not even myself. Then she texted me one night. I don't know how she got my number, but it was a message that felt way too casual for the weight it carried. "Hey, I opened a new bottle of wine tonight. Would you like to come over and help me finish it?" I stared at my phone, wanting to say yes. I knew this invitation wasn't about the wine, it was about her, and what we both knew had been building between us. And deep down, I knew that if I went over there, the line we've been hovering around would be erased. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the reply button. There were parts of me that knew it was a bad idea. This wasn't just another neighborly visit, but the thought of being alone with her again in that charged space where anything could happen was too much to resist. Sure, I typed and hit send before I could change my mind. When I got to her house, she greeted me with that same teasing smile and a glass of wine. She was dressed casually, but there was something intentional about it. Her clothes were comfortable and attractive. We sat on the couch. At first the conversation was fake, but you could feel the tension in the air. Every word and look felt like a build-up to something more. The wine eased my last doubts. Our laughter got softer and more personal, and the space between us on the couch got even smaller at one point. She reached over and put her hand on mine. She said, "I'm glad you came over," with a low voice, and her eyes locked on mine. The light touch of her hand sent a shock wave through me. There was no longer any pretense, the line between us was almost gone. As I sat there, I knew we were going somewhere. We couldn't get back from the invitation had been the start of the end. And now we were both waiting for the inevitable moment when everything would fall apart. The evening went on, but the air between us grew heavier. Every touch, every look felt like a step closer to crossing that line. We've been flirting with since the beginning. She leaned in closer, her body language more open and inviting the wine. Made everything feel easy, like this was the most natural thing in the world. Her hand stayed on mine, and the warmth of her touch made it impossible to think straight, you know. She said softly, with barely a whisper. She said, "It's been nice having someone like you around." The way she said it, and the way her eyes met mine, told me everything she wasn't saying out loud. I knew I should leave before things got worse, but I didn't. Instead, I leaned in a little more, my body moving toward hers, as if it were pulled by an invisible force that was too strong to resist. She saw me and smiled slowly. She moved closer and pressed her leg against mine on purpose. "I've been thinking about you more than I should," she admitted, her voice almost shaking with the weight of the words. The admission made my heart race. There was no more hiding if we both knew where this was going. The line we'd been dancing around for so long was almost gone before I could answer. She moved in.